so much for that. Interesting to see how AI continues to permeate pretty much every aspect of this space. Excited about the crew that we have coming up next. Not the least of which is another of the Bittensor co-founders, Ala Shaabana. For those of you who were here when David spoke, this is Mask Guy. Excited to hear him talk again, or for the first time. Marcus Graichen, founder of Taostats, is also going to be joining. Robert Myers, founder and CEO of Manifold Labs. And Jose Rios, founder of BTLabs, is going to be speaking about the mining intelligence on the open web, moderated by Victor Teixeira, co-founder general TAO Ventures. Please help me by welcoming them to the stage with a big round of applause.
Here we go. Hey, hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Good afternoon.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello.
So I was thinking maybe we start with just a quick round of introductions down the line, and then we can get into the questions in terms of how mining intelligence on the open web. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Yeah. So, Jose, you want to go first?
Jose Rios, BTLabs.
Robert Myers, founder and CEO of Manifold Labs.
Mog, founder of Taostats.
I'm Ala, co-founder of Bittensor and co-founder of Labs.
So, and I'm Victor Teixeira from GTV. And so just to kick this off, Ala, let's start with you. What would you define as mining intelligence?
It's a very good question. I think we were discussing this earlier in the room, and I think that calling it mining might actually not even be accurate, because you're more constructing intelligence as opposed to pulling it out in that sense. And so I would say that participation in a protocol like Bittensor, in which you are effectively part of a group of peers who are all optimizing towards a common objective, that's what really mining is in Bittensor. And when you're optimizing together, you're sort of together forming this amalgamation that allows people to access intelligence in a way that hasn't been accessed before. So in this sense, I think that's the closest definition that I have of mining that I've seen. It's evolved quite a bit since we first started Bittensor, but it's gotten to the point now where I think we're more constructing the intelligence that's coming out as opposed to just picking it up selfishly.
Anybody else have any other definitions that they want to add into that?
Yeah, just to follow on from that, obviously intelligence also defines what's required to succeed, whether you're optimizing the inference returns, the infrastructure that you run as a miner, and also as a subnet owner, you are rewarding intelligence and superior steps up of intelligence.
So if I could just double click on that and just curious to open it up to the panel, just in terms of, you said intelligence in terms of the infrastructure, like what do you mean on that?
So obviously, there are very different levels of mining depending on the commodity produced by the subnet, and different levels of what's required to achieve success. And some are basic returns or fulfilling a certain criteria, but normally when a network becomes, or a subnetwork becomes more complex, there are infrastructure elements required to do this. Now you look at something like subnet 4, it requires an immensely complex structure. Someone like Shoots or 19, all of these have evolved from just returning inference to running. I mean, these are companies, those behind the mining, and no longer just people sitting in their bedroom, but they really are well-formed and well-organized entities who have really had to evolve the commodity production.
And at the same time, being inspired by Bitcoin in a way, right? We can adopt some of the nomenclature, right? If you think about it, Bitcoin mining, you go back to gold mining, is extracting value out of anything that gets rewarded. It's, at the end is the act of mining. So I think we're producing intelligence, we're producing something that needs to be incentivized. Then we end up using the word mining, and sometimes it can be controversial, but at the end, we're producing AI services or other goods that people pay money for.
So maybe throwing this to you, Rob, like how do we guarantee that this intelligence that we're actually getting with the incentive mechanisms is what we actually want out of the ecosystem?
Well, that's actually one of the real challenges when you're developing a subnet. if you do not have a really solid verification mechanism for the intelligence that you're producing, what you'll find out is that the miners will actually optimize exactly for what you're incentivizing. And so my perspective on this is that you want to allow for as little wiggle room as possible. If you think about referring to Bitcoin, you have to produce a SHA-256 hash, right, as fast as you can, as many as you can. And there's no real way to break that. But if you're producing, let's say, a type of intelligence that is like reducing a loss, like you're measuring a gradient, for example. If that gradient, it can be passed through to where it always has the perfect loss, right? Maybe you don't even need to run an actual training run, right? You can just always be passing through that gradient. And so you have to develop your verification mechanism that goes hand in hand with your incentive mechanism to actually drive the results that you're looking for.
And so just on that, if I open it up to anybody here, it's just in terms of the fragility of that incentive mechanism, where's the line drawn on that? Where do we see kind of those challenges there?
One of the fragility is the ever-changing needs. As Rob says, you obviously have to incentivize the right thing from the miner, and it's a very fine balance because you can often find that once you've achieved that goal and all the miners are outputting at a certain level, you then need to incentivize something slightly different or evolve that. And of course, the fragility can also apply to the fact the miners will try and break whatever it is that you've made, will push it to its limits. So there's always this it's a very fragile ecosystem as you evolve as a subnet owner, as a miner, to constantly try and optimize and better the outputs of your subnet.
Anybody else in terms of fragility?
I was just going to say, the one thing to add here, and I think that's a point that Jake made earlier today, is that at this point in time, we haven't built any of the subnets anymore, right? It's Jose, it's Rob, it's Marcus that have built these subnets, and each one is tackling a very different problem. So even the fragility of their own consensus and their own subnets is largely dependent on them and how they build it out, right? And so that really kind of goes back to every single problem and just how bespoke and tailor-made each subnet has to be according to the problem that they're trying to solve.
And if we step out of the Bittensor or crypto ecosystem, we still have this fragility in the traditional startup world and in Silicon Valley, where I spent 25 years. I broke free a couple years ago, so I'm happy to join this crowd. But if you think about it, any idea is fragile out there as well. But this system is rewarding it and verifying it and evaluating it real time. So we don't have to wait for the end of the year to see if this thing sticks. We know pretty quickly when it doesn't work, when we break it and we fix it. And fragility is there, and we have probably a better way to quickly assess it and react.
So maybe going into kind of like where we're going with regards to building, right? I think in terms of Bittensor right now, we're sitting in a situation where we kind of have one of two types of subnets. On one hand, we have the subnets that are kind of the data storage subnets, where it's like you come in, bring a miner, do a job, get rewarded. And on the other hand, you have, here's a challenge, get up to that level. How do we see the balance between those two going forward? And where do we kind of see maybe are we going to see more of the former or more of the latter, in your opinion?
I think that we're actually going to be seeing a lot more of the former there, or the latter, excuse me, where the miners themselves are infinitely optimizing the type of commodity that they're trying to produce. A really great example of this is Templar, for subnet 3 on Bittensor, where the type of commodity that they're producing is language models, LLMs, and they're training it in a decentralized, coordinated fashion. Now, in order to actually be competitive on that subnet, you cannot use the base miner, right? You have to produce your own miner that is incorporating distributed data parallelism, fully sharded data parallelism, different types of 4D parallelism strategies. And that's where the actual competition lies. And so I think that a lot more subnets are going to be following that sort of trajectory, where it's so much miner edge, where you're really attracting the smartest people to produce that commodity, especially like for example on our subnet, right? I've learned so much about networking, from the miners themselves. Learned so much about this hardware, and so really trying to drive the kinds of outcomes that you're looking for is really going to be coming from that miner edge and that miner skill.
If I could say, a steeper barrier to entry is the mark of a successful subnet. It's just a natural evolution.
No, just keen to kind of double click here on that is essentially, right now I think we can all agree that one of the big things that is attracting a lot of miners into the ecosystem is the fact that there are these margins and there are these rewards. How do we guarantee this post-halving in the long run? Where is this kind of guarantee that Bittensor will always attract the best miners to Bittensor first over any other ecosystem?
I guess that's me. I don't think that problem that you're describing, the bringing in the best miners, bringing in the best talent, is sort of a set and done thing. It's not a fire once sort of thing. It's a continuous evolving process we have to always work on. And in fact, in creating basically the eventualities to create state-of-the-art, whether it is in AI or in even in general inference or in general training, this is where you start really putting Bittensor on the map in the AI communities as well, right? And this is where you bring in all the creme de la creme of talent to actually start participating. And this is, in turn, going to become a bit of a flywheel effect. We're going to have more and more skilled and very clever and very creative people building more on Bittensor. I'd argue even it would go to the point where I don't think the halving even is going to be all that relevant, right? As long as you have this continuous flywheel, people kind of joining and building, we're always going to be approaching state of the art and eventually beating it regardless. And especially with the advent of open source AI, where it's gotten to the point now where really it's almost neck and neck with closed source AI. So I think with the correct incentivization of open source AI as well on Bittensor, we'll actually be able to start pushing the envelope in that sense.
So to just double click on that one, I think that's really interesting, is how do we get to that point where we are now competing head to head? How can we take the fight to OpenAI? Or should we even be taking the fight to OpenAI? Is that even the right question?
I actually think that it probably won't be too long until OpenAI is actually participating. OpenAI, Google, a lot of these very large AI labs, Anthropic, are participating in Bittensor. They've already said in the 4.1 GPT 4.1 technical talk, Sam Altman and that team said that the way that they're going to continue scaling, because they've completely run out of GPUs to be able to do these training runs. That's why we're seeing diminishing returns on the training runs they're currently doing and the models that they're releasing. They need to be able to leverage compute from all around the world and really tie that compute together. So, whether it's 6 months, 18 months from now, it wouldn't surprise me if OpenAI is actually participating, whether that's in the form of utilizing the commodity that's being produced on a subnet, or even starting their own subnet to be able to coordinate this global compute.
The reason open source wins is already based in history. History repeats itself. We're in a very historic place. Just look at Linux. Today, the internet doesn't run on Windows, right? When I was 19, I started working at IBM on a project called OS2. So I don't know how many people run OS2 on their laptop here. Not a lot of people. Yeah, so I think what happens is that there was a well-funded company that was as sexy as OpenAI, right, with the smartest people that you could find. And that didn't work out, right? It took 30 years, but today Red Hat is a Linux company. It's a subsidiary of IBM, and they're one of the few people at IBM that make money. So in general, you can see how you can innovate faster and fix things and move faster with open source.
Trade. And maybe just jump in to kind of flip the script. I think we're talking here from the supply side. Let's talk from the demand side. How does DTAO tie into this? How do we kind of maintain those structures with DTAO going forward? And how does that play into kind of this whole incentivizing mining?
So the way that I actually think about it is that in order to actually I think that DTAO, in pre-DTAO, there was just a reward function, right? And anyone who's ever done reinforcement learning knows that you have a reward function and a cost function. Pre-DTAO, it was just a reward function. Now with DTAO, the cost function has been introduced, and so you need to actually monetizing the commodity that is being produced on your subnet. And so I think that what we're going to end up seeing is a lot of these inflows going back, and I think a really great example of this that we're seeing right now as a pure play commodity subnet is TAO Hash. Where the validators are actually incentivized to continue accruing more of the alpha so that they can have a larger share of the Bitcoin, or the Bitcoin that is being produced on TAO Hash. And I think that TAO Hash is such an interesting subnet in Bittensor. I think it really needs to be studied as these new waves of subnets that are going to be coming out, where it's not just traditional AI commodities, but all different types of commodities that can be produced.
I think just to add a little bit more onto what Rob is saying, I'm going to put on my business hat, take off my engineering hat for a sec. The interesting paradigm about DTAO is that it's effectively forcing all of these startups to IPO instantly, right? You're no longer just hiding in stealth mode, building whatever. You're out there right away. You have people to answer to. You have investors to answer to, and people to keep you accountable for what it is that you're building, what it is that you're doing. So as a result, people are sort of, in a sense, forced to take the gloves off right off the bat and try and iterate on the quality of their software as fast and as well as possible. And I think that in that there's a little more power than other projects that might basically allow you to stick around in ambiguity indefinitely.
So just on that, I guess the question is that a risk in of itself that you're essentially asking early stage companies to have this much more at the start of their kind of life cycle, where a lot of these businesses essentially have this further down the line? They usually have 2-3 years in incubation before they even have to even think about these things.
Do you want to? Okay, I'll do a quick one, then it's all you. It is a risk. There's definitely a risk there. However, you're also trading in, with the risk comes in reward, right? You're instantly liquid. You don't really have to worry about, let's raise this, let's raise that. You kind of right away have an income you can actually generate off that and build off that, and sort of you have more leverage as a result. So with the risk is also rewards. It's a bit of a balancing act in that way.
And also, isn't accountability for value such a bad thing? I'm aware we're at a crypto conference, but very often there is a lot of hype associated in this industry, and Bittensor strips that back and sort of says, actually, you are accountable from day one, and you must deliver. Not necessarily 100% revenue based, but perceived value and provable value.
So maybe to add an extra lens to that question is from a VC standpoint, how does the interaction come into this in terms of on that side with regards to that risk and that structure? How should VCs like ourselves on our side be thinking about this?
You can have it. It's interesting, actually, and a lot of that comes down to the design of the subnet and how they wish to structure their revenue or their investment opportunities. I have these discussions with a lot of subnets, whether they want to offer alpha token allocations, whether that's in the best interest of the subnet, whether they're taking traditional equity, and I think very often, a VC might get involved in a traditional product because they see that it's going to generate a lot of, I'll use the hype word again, but a lot of perceived interest. Whereas in this ecosystem, one of the pieces of advice I give to VCs is, can you see actual provable value in the future outputs of this subnet and how they may be used? Especially when we talk later about how they can be used as very much an infrastructure layer to spawn other businesses and greater use cases.
So just to add one thing, I'd even argue that it shouldn't change the game too much, namely because at the very early stages, and I'm saying this as a person who's on the other side, not as a VC, VCs they tend to invest in the team as opposed to the product. Initially, there's no real product to invest in, right? It's an MVP maybe, an idea, but no real thing. But you would invest knowing that this team will work cohesively together, this team will actually build something interesting, they have the pedigree, they have the knowledge, and they're actually going to pull this off. I think in the same way, it's pretty much the same thing. The only real difference is how do you want to structure that deal? Knowing that effectively whatever it is you're investing in will instantly have a liquid equity to actually return back to you in that way.
Just like in the traditional world, we are investing in teams. So I agree with Alan. From that point of view, you are, if you just want to jump in, just buy TAO, right? But if you're investing in people, at the end, you're figuring out the expertise they bring and kind of what's behind their product. Sometimes the same idea, it gets executed or not by different people. And also remember now we're all investors, right? In DTAO now, a miner is an investor because we get paid in alpha and we get to decide, how do we spend our time and our talent and our GPU resources.
So just on that, and I think this is an interesting point to touch on, is should we be thinking of the miners as part of the team? Are they are part of the ecosystem. They are a core part of the product. Should that be something that should be assessed?
That is a really nice way to put it. Yes and no. I think in a way you should think of the miners as, it's kind of hard to put it down properly. They are part of the team because they are constructing with you, right? You are using their knowledge, and You're effectively taking the principle that there are people a lot smarter than you that can actually solve this problem as well as you, or even better, together, right? But the trick becomes in properly incentivizing your miners. If you're not properly incentivizing them, it's effectively like a horse. It will buck, it will kick you off, and then you will have to figure out what to do from there. So in that way, it's sort of a give or take thing. But I think the subnet owners can probably answer this question quite well from their end too.
Yeah, so I totally think of the miners as investors, or not investors, as a part of the team, excuse me. Well, I think of them, I guess, in a way of that too. But really, like, if you think about the, 2-3 years ago with the creation of Bittensor, a lot of the miners that participated in Bittensor then actually became, subnet owners and developed new things for the Bittensor protocol. And so I actually think about it very much in the same way, where the miners that are participating today, tomorrow could be validators on the subnet with the alpha that they accrued, monetizing the commodity that's on there, and then, building businesses on top of that to actually, generate revenue with the commodity that's being produced. And so, it's really important to have a good relationship with your miners, a transparent relationship with your miners, to be, asking them, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because sometimes they'll tell you and sometimes they won't. And so it's really important to make sure that everyone is aligned in the actual code itself. Code is law at the end of the day, but there's also the human element there, and so having them feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, I think is, in the wise words of Matt Beck, believe in something.
Yeah. I just want to double down on the miners thing. I'm a miner, right? I mean, my wife jokes, not a miner, but because I have an accent, but. Hey, it's the kitchen. All these people are building restaurants. Without a kitchen, you would not have a restaurant, right? And we rely on the crew there to make the product and put it out. And at the end of the day, you can watch a lot of cooking shows, but that doesn't mean you know how to cook. So I think we definitely want to double down on that.
I think on the fact that all four of us want to answer this question should show the importance. For me, they're the contractors, and they are the people who are most invested and involved in solving the problems that you're setting as a subnet owner. No one understands your subnet mechanism better than those that are trying to work for it. And so the best are absolutely crucial in helping you to evolve as a business. And in all the subnets that I'm involved in currently, there are groups with the best miners and the subnet owners and those that are running and writing the mechanisms to help to improve it. Of course, going back, there is a fragility to this. You must be careful not to take into account bias, but then also from an economic perspective, these entities will end up being the largest holders of your token, and you should include them in opportunities that arise to help both yourself as a business owner and to themselves.
So just on that risk lens, I think there's an interesting risk here that I see is that, well, what happens if a miner gets too good? Right? If you're, for example, on a sports betting subnet like SN41, if you're really good at that, you're probably not going to be posting your results there. You're actually going to be on sports books and betting that. How does that happen? Where's the risk there? Where's that kind of trade-off in the ecosystem?
It's happened. There was a time on subnet 19 in the early days where a specific miner was substantially better than everyone else, and you could see it in the incentive curve. And of course, they are incentivized then to just expand and eat up the network. But if they truly, and in this particular miner did truly care about the network, they publicly communicated that they were going to set a limit. And as Namare posted at the time, he saw that as a natural plateau. There was a time when GPT 2.5 came out, and everyone in the industry went, and they had 6 months to catch up. And there was this plateau in advancements, but they did catch up. And it's exactly the same as happened with the mining intelligence. The other miners did catch up, and when they did, the advancements accelerated again.
Good chefs open restaurants. Not all of them are good at running them, but
I think the one thing I was going to say is, if you have a miner that's too good in your subnet, that's actually a good thing. It's not really necessarily a risk or a bad thing, because it tells you a lot about your current design. Is it flawed? Is there something wrong? Where are you going wrong? How are these miners beating it? Or are they just doing it the right way? They're just better than everybody else. There's a lot of data in having a really good miner in the first place.
No, fair enough. And I think another thing that it goes to the open source ethos, right, is that if you created something really good and you already got that next step ahead of you, you might as well open source the last thing, right? Because you want to set the bar up, and then you can challenge to push yourself to the next one. So I do think it's interesting. So I guess just kind of maybe round this out back into kind of like, where do we go from here? Where do you guys see is the lowest hanging fruit for us to get to 100 million plus user use case on Bittensor? Where's that kind of that natural path towards that mass consumer adoption of the intelligence that's being mined on Bittensor?
I think it's interesting as to how we quantify 100 million users. Are we talking about 100 million users knowing that they're using a direct derivative product that's directly deployed on Bittensor, or using a product that they have no idea runs on Bittensor, but is just using Bittensor as an infrastructure layer? We can look at Targon and Shoots serving trillions of tokens, or a trillion tokens a day on OpenRouter. The majority of those OpenRouter users, or those Shoots attributes having 300,000 users, I'm pretty sure that they have a lot more through OpenRouter that they don't know about. They consider OpenRouter to be a singular user. So by providing Bittensor products as infrastructure layers for other products to be built on top of, I believe we may actually be in a wonderful position where we lose count of that 100 million.
Yeah, so if you think about, like, I like to think about commodities and products as like oranges and orange juice. And so what's being produced on Bittensor is like the oranges, right? And so the people that are actually, using the product itself, the orange juice, drinking the orange juice, they probably don't know the farm in which the oranges came from, to Mog's point. And so I do think that we're actually already, in the millions of users of the commodities that are produced on Bittensor today. And if this growth kind of keeps up, over the next 12 to 18 months, it wouldn't surprise me if we hit that number very organically, merely because we're making really great, because the people that are leveraging the oranges that are being produced are making really great orange juice.
I like the quote that Cons used to put out there that said that Bittensor is the first mass adoption of a crypto product that is not a financial instrument, right? So if you think about that, that just really stuck with me, and I know JJ has retweeted and often talks about it. I think at the end, we have to remove friction from the system, right? At the beginning, you had to be like, know a friend, and then you have to hack your way into mining, and it gets complicated. Today, people use the internet without being a TCP/IP architect, right? But right now, you kind of have to know your protocols and whatever. But I think everybody in this room that is associated with Bittensor is not competing with each other. Yes, mining is competitive, but the competition is out there. The competition is not here. We really can show how this is the internet of AI and incentivized models.
I love that. I agree with every single one of you guys. The one thing I was going to kind of maybe clarify a little bit is that, at least from my point of view, I'm noticing that there is a bit of a not a split, but you can kind of categorize most subnets into either research or product. And each one serves a completely different purpose, right? So, and each one is incentivized completely differently. And at the same time, each one actually is a path together towards the 100 million users you're talking about, right? The product folks will actually bring in a lot of, real-world customers. They will solve a lot of real-world use cases that are, today they're problematic, right? Like, the simplest example is BitMind. I think they're somewhere in the crowd. They are actually solving a problem that I don't think should be centralized to one company. It's deepfake detection. How are you supposed to trust one company that's influenced by really anything to detect deepfakes reliably every single time? That's a product that's required, right? And then you've got on the other side of things, you've got the Shoots and the Targons and the decentralized trading subnets. Those are research subnets, but they're also going to be bringing in a lot of the research talent from outside, through the publications, through proper engagement, through DevRel, and et cetera. And that, at the same time, is also going to be another catalyst. So I think those two catalysts together are going to be the path forward.
So just to ask on that, in terms of this research versus kind of product side, right? I think if we take the example to an extreme of saying, all right, let's say that there's all the product subnets get massive consumer adoption, DTAO tokens, push those prices up. How do research subnets keep competing? How do they still incentivize the intelligence to come towards them versus going to another ecosystem where perhaps there's a different reward structure that makes sense?
Do you know how Microsoft Research runs the lab?
I do not.
It's very interesting. Usually they have a bunch of researchers putting together different prototypes or different state-of-the-art things. And if actually the product teams will come in and they will pick the ones that seem the most interesting and they'll productize that. Right? That's how you ended up with Windows Live Messenger way back in the day. That's how you ended up with the current iteration, Microsoft Edge. That's how you end up with really most things that you see. The Xbox Kinect, that was a Microsoft Research product that became a real product. And I genuinely feel like it's happening already on Bittensor. There are subnets utilizing other subnets. right? And a lot of subnets, for example, are utilizing subnet 19, which is sort of an inference subnet that's been around for a long time. But there's all kinds of products, all kinds of chatbots that are utilizing the outputs coming out of subnet 19. And it wouldn't surprise me to see subnets today sort of utilizing stuff coming out of Shoots or Targon that's already happening anyways. And as we grow, we're sort of going to be, in a way, drinking our own Kool-Aid, right? Using our own product and sort of growing ourselves that way.
So just to touch on the kind of talking about mining other subnets, do we see that as a risk that maybe some subnets are incentivized to essentially mine other subnets less good? Or is it something that is a boon for the ecosystem in the long run? Is it something where we will really see these flywheels kick out of it?
I do think it's going to be a boon for the other subnets, just because if what you're incentivizing in your subnet, what ends up happening is you get the best thing that you're producing, and then on top of that, right, it's also driving it down to its lowest cost because of that cost function that was implemented in detail. And so we can actually see other subnets being mined right now with subnets mining other subnets. That's actually going to drive the price down for all of these commodities being produced, which I think is a net benefit. And some people, they say, oh, this is very PvP, but I actually think that it really helps the whole, Bittensor holistically by driving prices down as far as we can.
And it also works as a proof of value for each of those subnets being used, because a miner isn't using a Bittensor subnet to mine another because of some loyalty to the network. They're doing it because it gives them the best incentive and the best cost reward. So if you are choosing 19 to use inference to mine a subnet that requires inference, it's because your outputs are better than using a GPT key, and you're getting better value for your money. Same thing with using Celium to mine Shoots. If you can run GPTs at the most cost-effective level, you're not going to be using Celium, but it might fall over and I might use my miners. It's because it's providing the best service. So,
yeah. In Silicon Valley, we have a lot of people reinventing the wheel in their own silos just because they think they can do it better, and we end up with many solutions to the same problem that are not compatible. And to do another restaurant analogy, I mean, restaurants buy pastries from the next door, the one that has a better pastry chef, and that's okay to do. Not everybody needs their own specialty.
No, that's totally fair, and I think this is one of those interesting things where the ecosystem is creating these little stacks that make sense, and then somebody else on another subnet looks at it and says, hey, that makes sense for what I'm doing. I might as well use that rather than try to build it myself, and that's the beauty of open source, right? So just to kind of close this out within our last 10 minutes here, can you just ask individually, one by one, what's probably the most compelling or unexpected use case you've seen be created in Bittensor?
I'll leave it to the subnet guys first. I'll go last.
I thought about this question on the plane on the way over. You've now changed it slightly because it was the most sort of interesting or novel and more of a quirky way. And we've seen things, and obviously the network size, but the usage of a subnet to interpret cat or dog animal noises, unsuccessful, unsurprisingly, but. As I think we agreed in the back room, something like TAO hash, because it's being one of the first to really push the incentivization of validation in the current network environment. And I'll pass it on this one.
I think the non-traditional AI subnets are really interesting to me. Some of them are turning out to be really good. There have also been some really other interesting networks that haven't lasted very long, like Lolacost, for example. It's been really cool to see the decentralization factor of Bittensor really allow anyone to express themselves. And I think that as we go over the next 18 months in Bittensor, this is going to be one of the biggest things, being able to express yourself. And so TAO hash, I think, is a really great example of a good subnet that's producing a pure play commodity, but also maybe some of the funnier subnets like the Meow subnets or Lolacost, and so ultimately at the end of the day, the expression is really promising and really exciting.
So Bitcoin holds a special place in my heart. So I think TAO hash definitely is a unique, let's call it unexpected and wonderful thing to see. But it's also unexpected to me to see subnets selling stuff outside, creating products that are maybe transparent to the outside, like 404 having 3D models that could be put into Unreal. That's freaking unexpected from this fragile bunch of hackers on the internet playing with funny internet money, and suddenly you have some output that somebody will pay money for and use. Maybe not pay a lot of money yet. We have to do a lot of betas. I mean, Google Mail was beta for a long time, but those are unexpected.
So, okay, I got two for you. One of them never really materialized, but it was proposed, and I think it was just would have been hilarious to see. Somebody has suggested a Google Earth style mapping of the world with a subnet, where they basically construct the hardware, giving out to people, and then basically have them mine by effectively driving these little RC cars all over the world. And the chaos that will be unleashed by these people would have been hilarious to see. But I think that presently that my favorite one is probably has to be 404, who are generating 3D objects in video games. I think they already have a partnership with Unity, which as a lifetime gamer, it's pretty cool to see. Because it was very unexpected. Did not really expect to see Bittensor generate objects on video games, but lo and behold, they're doing a great job.
I think the gaming subnets, it just makes absolute sense to me. I don't know if anybody else has ever tried to vibe code a video game together, and then you actually look at what assets cost, and then you actually look at that. It makes it absolute sense. So me as a gamer as well, I understand.
As a long-time GPU guy, before we use GPUs for AI, we use it for pixels. So it's cool. Let's bring pixels back to be cool again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just maybe in terms of looking forward, where do we see that biggest opportunity in terms of sectors of intelligence that we can capture here? Where's kind of the spot maybe that we're not even thinking about, but is there in the quiet eye, sitting in the background?
I think that pre-training is probably something that is going to be going through a sort of renaissance over the next couple of months. Templar is now training an 8 billion model. That's very exciting. IOTA, Subnet 9, they just recently released, and I think they'll actually be doing a novelty search with Ala and Jake tomorrow, so please turn in for that. But they're doing decentralized pipeline parallelism. I think that this is something that's like I've always described as the holy grail of AI. And so I think that's really going to be a very promising sector in the mining intelligence. Yeah.
I think that I absolutely love all of the decentralized training that's happening right now. It's gone through a bit of a renaissance lately, I'd say, because that's how we started Bittensor initially. It was just decentralized AI training. At the time, unfortunately, the technology just wasn't that good yet. We were dealing with models like Roberta that were just not very good to do anything. And it worked on a rudimentary level, but didn't really work on the same scale that Templar or IOTA are going to work. I'd say that the next step has also got me very excited. I'm sure that certainly once somebody cracks, or maybe even right now, but when somebody cracks the language models, the rest is going to come in, everything from video to images to audio. And that's already started to happen. I've seen quite a few audio subnets, quite a few image subnets. And I think that hitting the state of the art in the rest of the modalities is going to be very interesting to see.
Did you already go? Yeah, already. I'm looking to see Bittensor be more accessible and become more than a network, be a bridge to a lot of people that don't have access to the lucky few that are here creating things. People can use the universal language of math and be an AI practitioner. They don't have to be in Silicon Valley, work for OpenAI, and change their life. So anybody that's working on anything to make this more accessible, I like to join and help them, and this is the fun thing to me.
Perfect. Well, I think that's actually one last thing that'd be really interesting for us to finish off on here is essentially talking about the accessibility, right? I think one of the big challenges that we've seen is that a lot of the mining side is challenging, right? You have to register hot, cold keys. There's certain thresholds in terms of knowledge that are beyond even what normal Web3 is. How do we get over that? What's that kind of that final frontier there?
I think I can speak for myself at Taostats and JJ at TAO App that education has always been something that we've really been trying to push. And whether we have a docs, they're maintaining the official docs, and what we're both working towards in the interest of competition against each other, which is obviously beneficial to everyone else, is making that access as easy as possible to the point that you should be able to have a conversation with AI that should tell you about all of the nuances, the parameters of networks, how to get involved in mining, it will generate the code that will help you to optimize things. And I believe JJ is taking it to another level where you're also trying to automate the mining itself and have subnets that mine on. So there's a level that we're working at here to make it as accessible as possible. And we were speaking about it yesterday at in another session where really making it so that anyone can, from a hobby point of view, just say, hey, I'm going to go out and play with Bittensor right now. I'm going to see what I can do. I'm going to deploy something, and here is an agent that's going to help me do that and work with me. You know, it's like having a little tutor on hand. And obviously, it's taken a little bit of time to get there, but I think this is something that you're going to see a lot of in the next few months.
Thanks. It's funny. I've had this conversation today like a few times already. I think the best way to approach Bittensor for anyone is in baby steps, right? And I think that, like, Caro, you've been here since, what I'd say, maybe the 4th person to join Discord, besides me, Jake, and that's it, 3rd. And so I'd say that, and Mog, you as well, you've been here for quite a long time. Jose, you've also been here for, I'd say, about at least a year or so, right? So it's been a while. So I'd say that I think all of you can agree. Small baby steps is how you learn the system properly, and that means that when you start mining, maybe start on the smaller subnets, the newer ones, learn how that works, learn the general approach of how these subnets are set up, learn how the open source is set up, understand the templates that have already been created for the subnet users, subnet creators to actually build with, and then kind of grow out from there, right? It doesn't really make any sense for somebody brand new who's never done anything before to create a brand new subnet and start from there. That's a recipe for a mess. So it's always best to start very small and kind of grow yourself slowly, because that's how we all learned it the same way too. We kind of iterated over and over and over until we got to this point.
Yeah, I know for myself personally, when I first joined Contango and in the GTV team, candidly, I came from TradFi, so having to learn the whole process step by step was literally like, how do I register a miner on testnet? What's this thing do? And then realize, oh wait, I registered this completely wrong, and now I need to register another one. It was a whole process. So I couldn't agree more. And I think honestly, at this point, we were really in a situation where the whole ecosystem has pushed the upper bound, but I think is also lifting up the lower bound. And I think that that's a really, really important part. So given that we're down to the last 45 seconds, if anybody wants to throw in some last thoughts here, happy to open up to anybody.
Come to Novelty Search.
Keep pushing T.
Leader.
Amazing. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our amazing panelists today. This has been incredible, and hope this was helpful for the rest of the community here. Thank you all.